Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Witch History and Makeup with me, Brandy. I'm so glad that you're here. I know it's a Monday and Mondays are kind of draggy, but that's okay because I'm here to kind of spice it up a little bit for you guys. Today's actually a pretty awesome witch. I'm not really sure. I don't really like some of the things they did, obviously, but I like what they stood for. And of course, we're going to go through all that, but we are going to talk about a witch every single week here on this channel from history, whether they went through a trial or not. And I will be putting on makeup at the same time. And at the end of the video, of course, you're welcome to look in the notes or whatever and see what makeup I use. But I'm not going to be telling you anything. I'm just going to be doing, my makeup while I'm telling you guys this wonderful story about this guy. And his name is Motague Summers, okay? And he was very, very flamboyant. He was very outspoken. And he is kind of a staple in witch history, in my personal opinion, because in my research, this is the first time that a witch was openly gay. And of course, during this time, that was not a way to be. That was illegal, unfortunately. We'll get into it. So if that's something that you like, hit that subscribe button. But yeah, let's get ready and do this. So first off, I'm wearing this because it's cold in here, but I'm also going to be doing native history on Thursdays. Thought I'd just slip that in there because I feel like it's not talked about enough. Just like witch history is not talked about enough. So we will definitely be doing that on Thursdays, and we'll see how you guys like that. And if it's something you like, we'll stick with it. If not, well, we can always go back to witches. So the witch we're talking about today is named Motague Summers. He was born into a very wealthy, very large family. He was one of 7 children. Yeah, one of 7 children. And the oldest child was the only other boy other than Montague. Now, Montague likes to be called Monty for short, so we're going to say that because it's Monty's a lot quicker than Montague. You know what I mean? Even though Montague is a really cool name. Anyway, so he is born in April of 1880. Okay, so we're getting a little bit ahead in time this time, not so much in the 1600s, kind of going into, the 1900s here, so which is good. And he was born in England, of course. And England was very, very strict when it came to their societies. People still adhered to the Witchcraft Act, making sure they're not breaking any laws. There was no fortune telling. None of that stuff was allowed during this time. And there was something else about Monty that wasn't allowed during this time. And he was very much so gay. And he didn't care who knew it. No, he didn't care. He didn't care that his dad hit him on the regular because of it. He still went to school. He still learned. He got made fun of by some people, but he always had a really quick, funny comeback. It was never anything to hurt anybody's feelings. It was just something, a little quick little quip, And so he liked drama. He liked to be in plays. He loved melodrama, like really, really dark, dramatic things. And this will show up later on as we get down the road. But his father was Augustus Summers, which is actually Monty's first name. Augustus Motague Summers. I love that. That's awesome. Anyway, so his dad had his hands in a lot of stuff. He was a banker. He was a mercantile. He owned a mineral water bottling company. They had money, And another cool thing about how he grew up was they lived right down the road, like just a few hundred yards from a zoo. So you can imagine him as a child hearing this zoo at night, these loud, wild animals roaring and all this stuff. and they think, and he just, so he hears these exotic sounds, and that will come up later. So Montague was also an author, as we will come to talk about. He wrote many books, translated many books that came from the 1600s and things like that. He was a clergyman. Yep, he became a priest for the Anglican Church. Yeah, which is kind of odd for that time, considering what he was, a gay man, was illegal. It was not a legal thing. And so, but he didn't care. He was proud of it. He devoted his faith to it. He didn't see an issue with being gay and being a Christian or being with the church. And I feel that. This guy was really taking on some things, you know what I mean? And that's amazing. I love that. He did not care that what people thought of him, point blank, period, But it does come back to bite him. Of course it does, It always does. So he's a teacher and he's a traveler and all these things. His family, the oldest son, ends up going off to college. And this is when Monty is 7 years old. And so now all of his other siblings are females, and he's with his mom, who he adores his mother. He adores his mother. His mother was from Paris, and she had all these awesome stories about how everybody is like kind of more bohemian there. They're more laid back. Everything is just like way more chill, basically, in Paris than it is in England, where we are now. And so she would tell Monty all these stories, and he would just eat it up. And at the same time, his dad he just did not like it. He did not like it. He didn't know why his son couldn't be what he wanted him to be, and yada yada yada. He was always at odds with his dad. But by the 1890s, it was very much so clear that he was very gay, and he did not care who knew it, including his dad. And so after a while, he goes off to college, of course, and he goes to Oxford. And he doesn't really do much there at Oxford. He just kind of goes to school, I guess you could say. There were a few things that he did do. Like I say, he was in plays. He loved drama. So he put on a puppet show one time, but it was very, very, like I say, very dark, very dramatic. Okay. This was based on a book, basically. Okay. About witches and demons and vampires and all this other fun stuff. And he does a puppeteer play of this book that's about murder and about incest and, all the things. All the things everybody's like, this is so freaking creepy, like, why are you doing this? But it was called The Duchess of Malfi, which just talked about murder and incest and things like that. And so he did a puppeteer play on this. And you kind of think that's a little bit weird, He's kind of, people are starting to think maybe he is delving into the dark arts type deal. You know what I mean? That is bothering me. Sorry. So soon he begins to dress like a dandy. Okay. And this is in the, kind of the late 1800s, early 1900s. And, the dandy look was kind of something that was outdated then. But him being so into drama and so very dramatic, he always liked to dress different parts from different centuries. You know what I mean? It was just something that he did. So he would wear these silk scarves, these, frock coats, whatever that is. He would wear all these things, and he actually had these purple bloomers that he wore as well. And so, like I say, he wasn't scared to be who he was. Not at all. No, not at all. He was not. And I'm very happy about that. Only a few things end up happening, of course. the only reason anybody ends up getting a witch trial is something dramatic happens, and then people have a reaction to it, and that reaction most of the time is their witch or their or whatever. Okay. And so anyway, he believed in God. He was very also he even though he believed in God, he very much so believed in witches and vampires and werewolves. Now I get believing in witches. I don't understand believing in vampires and werewolves. I don't. That's just from stories, and things like that, so that we can learn lessons in our life. After leaving college, instead of going and finding a job and all that other kind of stuff like a normal guy would do, he decides, I want to travel the world. So that's what he does. He goes to a lot of different countries, learns a lot of different languages, which is very, very intelligent. So he was obviously a very intelligent guy. And then he ends up coming back to Bristol, to England. And this is where he kind of puts down roots for a while, like I say, because he wants to become a minister. And so he becomes one, and he becomes one of the Anglican Church, which when I saw the word Anglican, I was a little bit scared because they are very, very scary. And I don't, just back then, it was very scary. Like I say, you couldn't even do divination. You couldn't do tarot cards. That was so against the law. No, it's negative. You cannot do that. Not only was that against the law, being gay was against the law. Okay. And so, even though he lived his life very flamboyantly and talked and had a faith in God, he also believed in witches. Yes, he did. And he believed in witchcraft, and he believed in all these things because I think that he thought that he sees the light and the dark side, but he never really understood it. And we'll get to that too. Why? So basically what Monty would do was during the day he would preach, and at night he would study witches and witchcraft and all that fun stuff that he wanted to know about, because he felt like they went hand in hand. To him, he was studying the occult, okay? But he was also, like you said, he stood firm in his belief in God, but he also was very much so attracted to the occult, okay? And this is the way I think about it. I think of it as in when we're here on YouTube and we're watching videos. Now, I like to watch true crime, and so I feel like that's kind of how he was. That just because he liked it and liked to study it and liked to read about it doesn't necessarily mean he's doing it. You know what I mean? Most people that get prosecuted, and if they don't get, slayed, basically, then they become witch hunters to like basically outrun their reputation of being a witch. Yeah. And that's basically what ends up happening. That's what happens to him. And so, but something else happens that's not so great. And at this time, they didn't think this was worse than witchcraft, unfortunately. But in this day and age, it most definitely would. So I'm going to put this as gently as I possibly can without being too over the top. He was being accused of having relations with an underage boy. Okay, that's the way I could say it. That sounds appropriate. And which made him become an outcast. He knew that this was against the law. So he's going to get arrested. He had relations with an underage boy, for one. And back then now, 13 and below, that was harsh, really, really harsh crime punishment, obviously, duh, like it should be. But if it was between the ages of 13 and 16, it wasn't so serious for some reason. I'm not sure why, because then to me that's still a child. But because of this, Monty is accused of not only bewitching, probably people bewitching this boy and things like that. He's arrested because he's homosexual. They're like, okay, we can't allow this kind of thing to happen. And because he was a man, He came from a very good family, like a very rich family. This was kind of kept out of the courts. This wasn't criminally prosecuted. Being gay wasn't like a criminal thing. Um, they tried to try him on witchcraft, but they couldn't because technically, against to the witchcraft, act, he hadn't broken any laws. No, he had not. He hadn't actually done any magic. He hadn't actually done, or they hadn't caught him doing any kind of magic or anything. That he wasn't doing divinations. He wasn't fortune telling. He wasn't selling poisons. He wasn't, like our other witches. He wasn't doing any of that. The only thing he was doing was reading old text from the King James version, the King James era when he wrote that witchcraft act, and he was just incredibly interested in this stuff. But unfortunately, being a homosexual back then was a gross indecency, very, very much so. And so he, in retaliation, Monty publishes a book of poems. Okay, and I really commend him for this. I really do, because this really was a step out of the comfort zone of so many people. Like, because this was a first. This was the first for them, for somebody to be coming out like this and not caring what other people thought. So he had to have been doing something else. So he publishes Antonius and other poems. Now, he describes Antonius' memory of the bitter thirst of Caesar's farewell kiss, quote unquote, and said that Hadrian, quote, deflowered thy boyhood, did the emperor bid thy blood incarnate, which means redden, some Sabbath altar. Now, and because he said Sabbath, or Sabbat, however you want to say it, this landed him in hot water. By saying the Sabbath, this linked him to witches, by saying the Sabbath in the book, because this refers to like black masses and things like that. And so this is how he gets hooked with the name the Gay Witch. Yeah, he was the Gay Witch, is what everybody thought. And so, of course, he goes before. He did this. He wrote this book because he thought that he could end the slam on homosexuality. But he dedicates this book to a man who's French and who's also homosexual, but he's also an incredibly indecent man. Very much so indecent. Okay, so this French guy, Jacques, back in 1903, got in some trouble. This is the guy he dedicates the book to, okay? It involved underage boys, opiates, and Parisian black masses. Now, here is where we go back to him starting to talk about black masses and things like that. Because Jacques was charged with debauching underage boys at theatrical evenings attended by noblemen and priests. Yeah, so he was just like totally open about it too. He was convicted, and then he was annihilated in the press and then imprisoned. And so to dedicate a book to somebody like that is very strange, in my personal opinion. I wouldn't dedicate it to somebody that 4 years before you wrote it, because he wrote it in 1907. In 1903, this guy gets in all this trouble with underage boys and opiates and all this other stuff. And you feel me? Like, dude, seriously, stop. Don't do that. I wouldn't even do that. And so, because people in England, they didn't like people they didn't like other people, especially people from Paris. They thought they were perverted and gross and like all this weird stuff. English people regarded Paris as basically the devil's playground, you could say. They thought that they all worshiped the devil, that they all talked to and had orgies with the devil and all that fun stuff. All the fun things that they've said in the past too. And so, of course, this is very irritating. They say that there's all these exorcisms going on, seances, orgies, sex with the devil, sex with the devil as an animal. I mean, dude, you name it. This is what they were doing in Paris. At least this is what people in England thought people were doing in Paris. Okay, this is not what they were doing. But and this also kind of sparked on the stories that his mom used to tell him when she was growing up in Paris or whatnot. And so he was kind of just like, I guess this guy was ahead of his time as well. And Monty just kind of saw that and wanted to dedicate his book to him. Now the book in itself was good. It was the first time anybody really spoke about homosexuality, and the fact that he got the ball rolling actually made him like a literary genius, because he goes on to teach at different schools, and for long periods of time he taught literary stuff. He wrote plays, like I said. He translated old books. He was a very, very intelligent guy. And so even though they had this, some English man went to Paris and wrote this book called Le Boss, which means the damned. And it tells you all in glorious detail just how insane and crazy that Paris is. Like I say, they have sadomasochism, exorcism, murder, seances, orgies, witchcraft, Satanism. I mean, you name it, dude, they partying over there hard in Paris, according to people in England. So, basically, what puts the nail in this man's coffin, you ask? I shall tell you. He gets a hold of this book, The Damned. He reads about Paris. He reads about the Black Masses and all this stuff. And he's reading about it because he studies it, remember? He's studying it. This is for knowledge. This is for educational purposes. Now he wants to stage his own Black Mass. Mm-hmm. Yeah, this did not go over so well, you guys. No, this was pretty much the nail in his coffin when it came to what people thought of him. He became an outcast, like, immediately. People were like, that's no. There's no need in you recreating a Black Mass, because everybody was so freaked out by all the stuff in this book. They're like, don't do that. No. So that was really, really bad. Unfortunately, though, he said, okay, I'm not going to do anything, This is in like 1907. Don't worry, I'm not going to do anything. Well, he goes on years later and he starts bragging, okay, about how he's been to so many Black Masses, all the Black Masses he's been to. He says, I've been frequently to Black Masses in Bruges, Brighton, and London. That's what he said, okay? He just kept talking about it, being so open about it with everybody, because he wanted them to know he was having a learning experience, right? Well, no, dude, it sounds to me like you were holding Black Mass. And that's what they thought too. So, he got arrested. Yep. The gay man, the gay priest that turned to a witch, he had to go, they said. So, of course, he was jailed. And his reputation went down the crapper and all that fun stuff. But he didn't get a normal trial like anybody else. Oh, no. Of course not. Because, number one, he was a priest, That did make a difference. He had another advantage. He was a man, okay? And he had another advantage. He came from a very wealthy family. Yes. And so he kind of got off pretty easily when it came to these charges. He was charged with the sexual offense of the little boy, obviously. But they could not charge him in witchcraft because he technically wasn't doing any of the witchcraft. Because nobody really technically ever saw him. He could have been telling stories. So this is in history where there's like a little skip, because we don't really know if he actually did go to Black Masses or if he just held them as like a way of study. he's very contradictory to himself, but I think I understand why, and I'll tell you. But so the trial was not held in criminal court. It was a very less formal trial. He was accused of the pedestry, I guess you could say. Yeah, the pedophilia, whatever it is. I don't know if I can even say that word on here, but anyway, that's he got in trouble for that. But and then they took away, he couldn't be a priest anymore. So he was basically lucky to be alive at that point. I'm not gonna lie. Yeah. He was very much so lucky. So anyway, he leaves after this. He's like, yeah, I'm still steadfast in my faith. Yep, he was. He was very steadfast in his faith. And so he was like, I'm still going to go and I still want to be, what I can be. So he converts very quickly to Catholicism. Yes, he starts to become a Catholic. Yes. He actually, he prefers this because I feel like he gets more freedoms, but he's never shown as actually ordained by the Catholics. It's almost as if he dressed the part, pretty much, if that makes any sense. He wasn't. There's no role. There's no place that says he was, ordained like an ordained minister. But he said that he became a Catholic. He converted. He started teaching in a lot of schools and colleges because he knew different languages and writing and all that fun stuff. He was a very smart dude. He was a freelance writer because by the time the trials came and went, his parents were like, shoo, fly, you get no more money from us. No, we cannot handle this lifestyle that you were leading. You've got to find your own way. You're out of college. You've done all these things. The result, even though you're not a witch, you're still convicted of something. So you're not a part of the family, basically. So go on, make your own money somewhere. And he did do that. Like I say, he started to become a writer. And not only that, he brought up other older books and translated them into English. So he presents himself as this priest, right? But the only thing that kind of bothered people about him was like he would burn incense and things like that. Yeah, they weren't too keen on that. But then, okay, so even though I study witchcraft, my husband studies Christianity and actually every single religion. And I asked him, I was like, I thought all Catholics, I thought they all burned, incense. And he's like, nope, not all of them. And I was like, oh, okay, I did not know that. So I'm guessing that incense at this point in Catholicism was not a good thing. But I seem to remember that kind of being a thing. I don't know. Maybe that's just me. But anyway, so he presents himself as Father Summers. But he troubled people because he liked to burn incense. I mean, he chanted at religious services, but at all hours of the night. He would be doing these religious chants, and he had a private chapel that he built, and he would host parties with people like just as eccentric as him. Men would come and go to his little chapel, and they were not affiliated with the church in any way, shape, or form. And so people they knew that he was gay, but he definitely wasn't trying to hide it at this point, even being a Catholic. And so enter this politician, okay? Now, I'm laughing because this part is kind of weird, and maybe I guess I'm a little bit uncomfortable, but you can't really blame me. So this politician's name is Chips, okay? Chips Chanian. He visited Monty in 1928, and of course went to him to confess, as you do, as a Catholic does. Goes in there, tells him all of his sins, all that stuff, and is like just spilling all the beans. And so Chips bent before the altar, and Monty spanks his bare bottom with a red-heeled buckled shoe. Okay. And so, quote, old Chips says, and this is quote, the old priest wanted to seduce me. What am I going to do about Motague Summers? The old libidinous priest is gone on me, which meant in love or obsessed. He rings me up every day and sometimes more often. Now, Chip tried to stay away from old Monty, but he was very intrigued with this guy. You know, he's incredibly eccentric. He was very intrigued with Monty, and so he ends up going back and visiting him again. Okay, like something is going to be different this time. I don't know, but anyway, maybe he just wants to go and pick his brain, which is totally fine. I get that. And anyway, so he says the mad, eluded old priest with his tales of witchcraft, sorcery, and esoteric beliefs fascinates me. After a bad dinner, he whipped me with a dog whip, which seemed to give him infinite delights. So imagine having dinner with somebody and they just start beating you with a freaking, like a, what? I mean, what? Like, I don't think I would go back after that. You know what I mean? That's a very, very odd dinner. But old Chips, he went back for another shot. Yeah. This time we didn't get many details, but he did come out and said that Monty was as dangerous as he is brilliant. So we don't really know what happened, behind the old closed doors situation. But that's okay, it's all right. He definitely didn't go back after that. And this guy was like a politician. I think he was just going to try to confess his sins and kind of got sucked into the thoughts of the dark arts and, along with theology, all of that mixed in. You know what I mean? Regardless, though, regardless of Monty's sexuality, he was still very into his faith. He was very, very godly. Very much so, yes. He actually renamed himself as Alphonsus Joseph Mary Augustus Motague Summers. Now, he had dropped Augustus for a minute, and he dropped Augustus because that was his dad's name, and he was kind of irked with his dad for a while, and I get that, So he dropped it, but then he brought it back. Now, this was a very long, non-binary name. I want to say this is probably the first, maybe, of somebody changing their name and then being man, woman, as in being a they, them, which is fantastic. I mean, who knew? This is the first time in history witch history that I've come across this, of course. People have been, with the same sex for a long time. I mean, even animals and stuff like that. And of course, in my culture, we have two spirits, and it's a thing. It's a thing that people try to ignore, but you can't really ignore it. And this guy wouldn't let you ignore it. He was going to be godly and be gay, and he didn't care. So, props to you, my friend. Props to you for being a gay priest, Catholic priest. Blah, I cannot talk today. So, even though he was never proven to be an ordained priest, he still loved to be a Catholic priest and dressed as a Catholic priest and had his flares of wearing the gowns and all that stuff that they wear. He held private ceremonies, but given his past with that young boy, they don't think they're going to be able to ordain him. And as a matter of fact, on the census in 1911, he wrote that he was a Roman Catholic cleric. So technically, he didn't say he was a priest. He said that he was just a cleric. Basically, he still did God's work, but he wasn't ordained. Because there would have been a record of that. The Catholic Church keeps pretty good records of people being ordained, I'm pretty sure. This wasn't like being a minister where you could just have a vision and be tapped. It was like a whole entire thing. You feel me? Um, and so anyway, he moved away from all the fancy pants and scarves and all that stuff. And he started to wear different things to different events. Okay. In his leisure time, he would wear like flowing dresses. So he liked the feel of a flowing dress on his skin in his free leisure time. Of course, when he was doing his teachings, he would wear his frock coats. For theatrical work, a cloak, shoes with enormous silver buckles, and a shovel hat. And he would walk out in public in these different outfits and things like that. And of course, people were just like, wow, this guy's a strange one, but he's just the old priest, is what everybody referred him to. So by 1927, his works, a lot of his books and things, had became incredibly well known. And so he employed a secretary named John. And now that old dude, he was making money and things like that. He could do this because he was still a writer and, all that fun stuff. So John had actually helped officiate private ceremonies in the chapel, guys. And this was against the church. Like, private stuff was like between the clergyman and the other person, like confessions and stuff like that. That was who that was between. But for some reason, John would go in there with them too. But we kind of feel like that maybe the private church was a little shifty, if you know what I mean. I think he did some other things in there too. But we'll see. And so anyway, it just suggested that he had a close relationship with this John guy. But he actually ends up spending the rest of his life with a guy named Stuart. And, they had a little dachshund and a little dachshund dog. Yeah, he was, super cute little doggy. Everybody thought that was like their familiar, of course. But see, it always followed him. That's why he became a witch hunter. He basically rewrote all these, like, Demonology by King James. He redid that book, and a lot of, and the Malefacorium book. He redid those and added his context to it as to what it believed, what he thought it believed. He translated them. And so this kind of put him on the literary map with a lot of people, which is a good thing. At this time, it's like 1930. He's living openly gay now. Like, first off, he said that Stuart was his stepson when they had moved around quite a few times, because this man moved so much. Let me tell you, you think that he was on the run from something. Just saying. But anyway, so the last time they end up moving, he's like, no, this is my man. Deal with it. Y'all are just going to have to deal with it. Yeah, I'm a gay priest. Get over it, basically. He didn't care anymore. And I don't blame him, because by now he's getting older in age. And as we get older in age, we really stop giving a crap about what people think of us, And so at this stage, it's probably like, you know what? I'm gay. And everybody knows it. Just let me just do it and just be it. So at this point, he defied all of his enemies, moved on from his terrible rep as a gay witch, that's not a terrible rep, but for back then it was, okay, because being gay was very illegal. Being a witch was very illegal. So to them, he was tainted, but in his mind, he was just studying these things. He just wanted to know more about these things, And so, but he sets up his literary legacy, moving from one side of demonology to the other. Like, he literally becomes like a witch hunter, but he doesn't actually go out and hunt witches himself. He just writes about it, basically. Writes about who you should look for, what you should look at, this type of deal. He writes about witch hunting to try to run from his reputation of being a witch in the past. So after he writes in 1926 the history of witchcraft and demonology for this series called The History of Civilization, he followed that book up with a geography of witchcraft and translated and published works that were written in the medieval and Renaissance era. Like I was telling y'all, in those medieval Catholic Church times is what he was translating. And so in 1928, he completed his journey from witch to witch hunter. Like I say, Monty was different now. He was not the same person that he was. Witches were more like communists, he said, an evil liver, like an evil person that lives, basically. A social pest, a parasite, a blasphemer, a shishmortionist, the dark counselor of lewd court of ladies, minister to vice, witch lives were all sin and rebellion, basically. I mean, this is what he thought of witches. He's done his homework on witches, and now he thinks they are absolutely freaking terrible. Okay? Now, what do our other witches have in common that they do not have in common with this guy? Well, two. He's a guy, first off. And he came from a rich family. So he was kind of able to just flip both sides. You know what I mean? He was able to talk about witchcraft but not be accused of witchcraft. He could read about it and talk about it and translate it for people but not actually practice it, which is true. You can do that. Like I say, people sit on YouTube and we watch true crime all day. Doesn't necessarily that means we're going out and planning to do true crime. You know? That just means it just, I think it just interested him. I think it really interested him, and the way he steps out as a gay man earns all of my respect. I wish he hadn't had relations with a young boy. That kind of dropped him down just a notch, a few notches, because that's just not good, And who knows if it was consensual? It might have been. I don't know. It might have been consensual. We don't know. But he releases all these books and all this stuff, and he's just angry in the history of witchcraft. He's just, after he's read what King James has written and all these other books and translated them, he really dislikes witches now. Monty believed every single thing that he read on witches. Point blank, period. Yes, he did. He believed every single thing he read. And so he believed in God, he believed in angels, he believed in demons. And he also believed in witches and vampires and werewolves and magic and all that stuff too. He believed in all of it. He believed it all went together. You know what I mean? So he said that witches were curses. They gave unhappy energy. They did wax images, made poisons. They were communists, Satanists, orgies with the devil, kissed the devil's behind. That was a first for me. I never heard that one as a rite of passage. Satanic sermons, of course, the black masses. They said they exhumed dead bodies and ate deceased children. This is what he thought of witches at this point in his life. He never sees the side of it that women were fighting for their rights to be able to help heal people and to be able to make a living on their own and maybe choose who they want to marry and how many kids they want to have. But see, he wasn't thinking that way because first off, he was a guy, and second off, he was gay. So he didn't have any kids. He didn't have to worry about that part, He only had to worry about himself. And so that's something we got to keep in mind here. He believed everything that he read on witches, and that he made himself a victim of circumstance, basically. And he didn't understand that women especially wanted femininity. I knew I was not femininity. They wanted to be more feminine, but they wanted to do it their way. That's something that he didn't understand because he wasn't a woman. I mean, you can't understand something as a woman and you got to be a woman. You feel me? I don't know how I would say that. So he no longer celebrated witches. He condemned them. He's like, no, 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 no longer are we going to be friends anymore. No. I'm done with the witches. So at first, he has a great experience with women. He loves having their company around. But now he has a grudge against it. But it's really to only save his own face, which is kind of sad in my opinion. So by today's standards, Monty is basically just a pedo. They did try him for magic, but like I say, he got out of that because he was studying it, and which was fine. Everybody's like, okay, if you're just studying it and not practicing it, even though he went around and talked about doing black masses. I don't think anybody ever caught him actually doing the black mass, and so really he was only on trial for his sexual orientation. So, I mean, I honestly don't know if this is the first trial where somebody was put on trial as a witch and also gay, because I couldn't find another one. But I'm sure he wasn't the first, because I mean, there's always been people that are gay, like since the beginning of time. So I'm sure he wasn't the only one. You know what I mean? Anyway, so but yeah, by today's standards, he was definitely a child molester. Unfortunately, he was trying to save his reputation there at the end by saying he didn't like witches and that witches did all of these terrible things. And, what we know of witches now is that's not true. They were healers. They were mostly women who wanted, freedom. Freedom from men. Freedom from having somebody telling them what to do all the time. That was the only thing that women wanted, And Monty, of course, lived under this guise of, yes, he was gay, but he was openly gay about it. He didn't care if people thought that he was gay. So you think that he would have been more for women's rights, but he wasn't. That part never clicked for him, unfortunately. So he lives through his trial and becomes, a Catholic cleric, even though he's not really. He just dresses up as one. He is a very shady character. I'm not going to lie, you guys. This dude is super, super shady, but he did a lot of good things in the beginning, by helping, he was helping people by mentoring boys. He was a freelance writer. He paved his own way after his parents told him to get out. They were like, we can't have you here. You're an abomination, an anomaly. That's exactly what they called it back then. They called them abominations and anomalies, and that's not who he was. He was just a gay guy. And I hate the fact that he ends up condemning witches to save his own face. But there it goes. The finger point. You got to take the shine off yourself, so you point the finger at somebody else. And that's what he was doing. He passed away in 1948 in his home in Richmond. He left everything he had to his man, Stuart. Let's see, Monty's sexuality was still legal in Britain for at least 19 more years. And even then, it has to be between two consenting adults. Yes, adults, not like 13 to 16 or below 13 or any of that. So I'd be consenting adults. And so we know that he went from being accused to the accuser, but we also know why he did that, because he was trying to save his reputation, stay alive, basically, because he was a gay man, and that was very much so illegal. And he was a priest, which just, I mean, this video just counteracts and unbalances so much of what I've talked about. Because he starts off like, you think he's going to be, because he liked being in the company of women. He just didn't like women like that. And so, he heard their struggles, especially as a priest and being a minister before that. He heard their cries. He knew. But he got sucked into the hole of he was studying so much of the demonology, he became into believing it. And then he started turning people into witch hunters. It was like, this person's a witch, this person's a witch. Even though he didn't hunt nobody himself, he still put it out there. He still translated these old texts from the 1600s and re-put it back out there. And that is kind of what started it all up again. So he basically did all this just for his own reputation, to save face, and I get that. I get that. But to me, in the beginning, it seemed like he was just wanting to have knowledge on the dark arts. Which there's nothing wrong with that. I watch true crime all the time here on YouTube. All the time. And I don't think that, and I've never gone out and done anything like the things that I've watched. It's just very interesting. I like to watch the way people's minds work while they're thinking in an interrogation room. That type of thing, But that doesn't necessarily make me an interrogator or a perp. You know what I mean? And so it's always the finger pointings, guys, If you can't take responsibility for your own stuff, then don't do it. You feel me? I feel like that's what this guy needs, If you can't take responsibility for what you do, then don't do it. If you're going to sit there and say, hey, I went to all these black masses and all these different places, and then you're going to go to court after everybody hears that, they're already upset because you're gay, but they gave you a lien because you're a priest for the Anglican Church in the beginning. And then now he's not an ordained Catholic priest, and he's a Celtic priest, and he builds his own little has his own ceremonies and stuff. I mean, you tell me. I think he's just trying to keep the attention off himself, But that is our witch for today, is Motague Summers. Yes, the gay witch. I thought that he was very, very interesting. I was super excited to come across him, and I think that you guys will definitely drop him down below in the comments why you think he flipped so hard from being, just studying witchcraft to actually becoming a hunter. How you think he made that leap. So, but anyways, I love you guys, and I will see you Thursday with some Native American history, okay? And makeup too, so don't worry. If you want to know what I used on my face, it'll be in the description below. I hope you guys have a glorious Monday. I love you. Take care of yourselves. Peace out.